Welcome, and thank you for attending today's webinar. I'm Michael Episcope, co-CEO of Origin Investments, and I'm joined here today by Constance Freedman of Moderne Ventures. And today's webinar is about property technology. And the purpose of the webinar is simply to educate you about how technology is tackling some of the biggest problems in real estate and making owning, building, and managing real estate far more efficient for everybody. Innovation is something we strongly believe in at Origin, and we are delighted to be hosting Constance, as she is one of the foremost leading experts in this space. Constance is the founder and managing partner of Moderne Ventures, and she has invested in nearly 100 companies to date. And I can personally attest to the fact that she is investing in some of the most innovative companies in this space today. And in full disclosure, I want to let you know that David and I are investors in Moderne's funds. And we originally invested for strategic reasons, to get a first look at the most innovative technology. And the relationship was really symbiotic because it allowed Constance and her team to test some of these technologies with our acquisitions team, with our investment management team. But I continue to invest because Constance and her team have done just a fantastic job generating returns as well. So thank you for being here today, Constance. And today we have an audience of more than 400 people made up of investors, operators, and just people who are frankly curious about the subject itself. The entire webinar will be no more than an hour. The first 20 minutes will be a presentation where Constance has some slides. I have a couple slides there as well. And we're going to discuss the landscape of property technology, otherwise known as kind of prop tech in the industry, and talk about some case study and companies that are really changing the environment and disrupting, I would say, a lot of areas, but solving some of the biggest problems like affordability out there today. And I'll briefly discuss some of the ways that Origin is using technology in our day-to-day operations as well. When we're done, we're going to have a more in-depth discussion, a Q&A that I will moderate. And please, along the way, ask any questions that you have. Constance, if it's okay with you, I might interject if the audience has a question pertaining to one of your slides. I will be monitoring those questions coming in as well. So this is more of a dialogue than a monologue the whole time. But I do want to thank you all for attending. And if you see that little pink M in the corner there in your Zoom, that is not another attendee. That is actually me. That's my wife's computer that I have on as well, because I'm running on some technical difficulties here this morning. Apparently my computer isn't holding a charge, so I have an emergency one sitting right next to me. So to take care of that, I didn't want to leave you hanging, Constance, if suddenly I disappear.
Thanks.
So Constance, can you begin by just giving us a brief overview of Moderne, and then we will jump into the presentation. And let me put up the presentation while you go. But thank you again for coming. Let me find how to share my screen here. All right, here we are. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. And the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Michael, so much for inviting me. And what we thought would make sense for today is like Michael said, I'll give you just a super brief overview of Moderne to give you all some context. And then we'll talk about some larger trends that we're seeing in real estate and technology at large, and then drill it down to a few practical applications and case studies just to kind of bring it to life a little bit. But just to start off on Moderne, so we are a venture fund. We focus on technology companies primarily across real estate and its adjacent industries. So real estate, finance, insurance, home services, hospitality. And one of the things that I'll just sort of impress is that while we're very focused on these verticals, we will also take a very generalist view to investing. And so what I mean by that is we're often looking outside of our industries to invest in companies that are relevant inside. And so, whether that's we think about AI technology or robotics technology or B2B SaaS platform. An example that everybody's familiar with is we were early investors in DocuSign, for example, which is not, you wouldn't call real estate, fintech, insurtech, but clearly is applicable across all of them. And so that's the philosophy we take, and we take that for a few different reasons. One, we know that disruption often happens from outside the industry. And so if we can bring a company outside inside, we can alert you all, our industry partners, into understanding what's coming and allow technology to happen for you, not to you. We also find that companies that have applicability in multiple verticals to also be healthier companies overall, which is good as from an investment and a customer perspective. So the way we're structured, we've been doing this since 2008. We're on our third fund, and really we've built a platform, kind of stemming from having invested through cycles, and also with this idea of how do we become most differentiated, but also create a lot of value for this platform in the industry. So at the top, you see we are a venture fund. We primarily invest in companies 2 to 20 million in revenues. That means that they're early stage, but real companies. Over the last 13 years, we've built a network of about 700 executives and corporates across our industries for people who are looking for tech and innovation to create a competitive advantage. And often they'll look at Moderne to help them do that. And the way we bring our companies together with our network is through something we call the Moderne Passport. So this is an industry immersion program, a 7-month program. We've been running it since 2013. We will bring 6 to 10 companies into any one class and run it 2 to 3 times a year, so about 20 companies a year. And really, it's a way to systematically help introduce technology into the network. We run mentor meetings, one-on-one meetings with our partners. We run pilot programs to help our industry partners try before they buy. And what it allows us to do from an investment perspective is get really deep diligence on these companies and help us cherry pick the best investments, but also bring a broad array of different kinds of technologies into the industry and into the network at one time, to try to solve for some of the biggest market gaps, opportunities, and challenges that we're seeing. Go ahead, Michael. So part of how, just if you will, go back before all the big logos came in. So part of how we think about, sort of companies that we bring into our ecosystem is we start at the top with, sort of the life cycle of a transaction. So everything from development to marketing, sales and leasing, financing transactions, experience, property management, and business operations. There's certainly, unique challenges that we see across the whole life cycle of a transaction. And go ahead and click on the next. And so, over the years, we've invested in about 100 companies that will fall into any of these categories. We look at about 4,500 companies every year, so we see almost everything. And what we do is we try to weed through all the crap and really just kind of pick out the ones that are going to be most impactful for our industry and for our partners. Go ahead. One of the things is, as Michael said in the beginning, we, about 60% of our capital comes from the industry. So, individuals like Origin or large corporations across the ecosystem, REITs and others. And one of the things that we try to do is think about strategically, strategically, you shouldn't invest in technology, whether that's invest as an investor or, as a customer, unless that technology is going to create a strategic benefit in some way. And so, the technology that you select should increase the top line in some way, decrease OpEx, in some way add to the NOI. And so one of the things that we try to do with each of our partners is think about, if you layer a set of portfolio companies, technology companies, as you see on the bottom, across your real estate portfolio, what can you see from an NOI impact? And, as a case study here with a multi-billion-dollar office multifamily master plan community firm that we're partnering with, we looked at how technology could increase NOI by as much as 8% on this particular company. And, that's obviously significant. And so, what the eye we take towards bringing these companies in is what strategic impact does it have for the industry? And obviously what financial return can it provide for the fund?
Constance, I want to go back just for 1 second because you had mentioned something that I think is probably the most challenging part of any private equity business, which is weeding through, I think you called it the crap, and
The
figuring out
crap.
which companies are. Yeah. Every time I see something that I think is innovative and new, what I realize is the space is actually very crowded, right?
Yeah.
Rather, and so maybe you can just give a little bit of insight into that, like when you're looking at these new technologies coming out that are filling a specific niche, and an example as well, how do you find the one to bet on? And is there one that usually wins, or is it a multitude of winners within the same space?
Yeah, it's a great question. Generally, just kind of starting from broad and coming back into it, oftentimes what we'll do, and sometimes it's our partners that will throw over ideas or different companies, or we'll do a deep dive into a particular group. Like I'll take LeaseLock as an example. So LeaseLock removes the security deposit, and from a multifamily, and still ensures the owner and operator of rent loss and damage control. So security deposit replacement is what this has been called in the past. And when we brought LeaseLock into our portfolio, we looked at, and I'll just say, there's a lot of competitors out there. People know about Rhino, they know about Jetty. There's a bunch of that will just call themselves security replacement tools. And so what we did when we took a look at this, and kind of any technology is the same example, is we'll plot them on a big industry landscape. We'll look at, sort of the product, the features, the cost, the time to implement, a lot of different factors depending on what the technology is, and try to map them on a 2x2 to see where they all lay out. And I'll give this as an example. The reason why we jumped onto LeaseLock is a bunch of reasons. Like the things that set that particular company out from the crowd was that it is the only true insurance model. The others are actually surety bonds, and so there's an inherent cap to coverage. It was the only one at the time that was nationwide. All the others were regional. It's the only one that sells into a building versus apartment by apartment. So it's got the highest quality of revenues. And, sort of most importantly, it's the only one that's actually providing this sort of like a data approach, and is actually providing, sort of underlying better quality residents as a result of what it's doing, because of the data that it's collecting, and sort of future predictions as it moves forward, in addition to providing sort of a lift on application increase because people aren't coming up with a security deposit, but also providing that protection across a whole building. And so at the end of the day, like, there was a lot of things that separated it from the crowd, and that's the kind of analysis that we'll do on any one kind of group technology or group of technologies that we're looking at.
Yeah, I love hearing the word only. When you can say that 3 or 4 times about a company, you know that they've got a niche in there. And I think you mentioned that several times with LeaseLock. So thank you.
Yeah. So kind of going to some big trends that we're seeing in the industry. We have seen a number of things that have come out of this last year in particular. And, we'll sort of think about it a little bit from the aspect of resiliency, experience, and sustainability, I would say. And so if I go into experience for a minute, there's a lot of different ways that we've responded to, coming from March, where the world, we had no idea what was happening, to where we are now. And some of this is pre-COVID, and some of this is an extension of things that were happening post-COVID, or, prior to COVID. But, I think one thing's clear is that it's very important to make sure that residents or tenants, depending on the asset class, are having a very great experience. And so how do you jump on that? Well, I'll start with saying, like, attracting the right residents in the first place. And so there's a lot of technologies out there that are making sure that, when someone's going on the website and someone's, searching for a different property, that, you lead there. We have a company called Perk, for example, that will ask certain questions. Are you a daytime person or a nighttime person? Do you value space, or do you value outside, kind of balcony? Do you value, different kind of things that you can ask to sort of hone in on the right unit to show them, or the right office space, and the right, facing the right direction and the right view, or, whatever it is, or, even, kind of separating the lookers from the actual buyers, and not sending the lookers away, but building the relationship with them until they're ready to actually be buyers. And so there's a lot of different technologies. There are a few in our portfolio that are using AI and other automated technology to do that, and really helping to kind of convert those that are most ready to come, with, you know, and allow you to spend your marketing dollars to those most likely to buy. So attracting the right residents in the first place is a good way to doing that. Go ahead to the next one.
Yeah, and Constance, we just had a question come in, and let me ask you to back up for a second, because
Sure.
somebody was a little bit confused as what your business model is. So I'll just, if I can say,
Sure.
but Constance is a venture fund, and so she is investing in, you know, early stage companies. And you can add to that, but I think they were confused as to whether you were a REIT and things like that. And then, you know, at the end we can talk about, you know, your fund returns and things like that. But this, so maybe you just want to back up for a second, because generally I find when one person has a question, there's other people that have the same one.
Yeah, sorry about that. So yes, we are a venture capital fund. So we invest all technology companies, no hard assets, just we're only investors in early stage technology companies. And our focus, the technology companies that we invest in, are around real estate. And we partner with a lot of real estate folks. A lot of our capital comes from the real estate industry. And we partner to help bring together the technologies with traditional owners and operators in the space.
Yeah, and it's set up very much like we're set up, which is a private equity fund. So people invest in Constance's fund, and then her goal is to invest in the companies and create a portfolio around that. And generally, they're closed-ended funds. So thank you for your question, and hopefully we cleared that up.
All right, so second trend around resident experience is thinking about just overall efficiency. So how do you make it easy to move? Yeah, so we've got a lot of different technologies that are focused on sort of that kind of solution of, all right, I've decided I want to come into this building. Now, you know, how does it, you know, go, how can we make that experience as seamless as possible, which most places it is not. So going from, you know, for example, the lease lock experience to, you know, ordering a moving service like Porch that will help me get my movers in, to, you know, maybe using a design firm like Havenly that will help me pick furniture and actually have it there when I move in, to, you know, signing up for something like, you know, it's Hello Alfred, which is hospitality coming into apartment buildings, and, you know, does everything from tidying up to doing my errands for me. And so anyways, we have a number of companies in the portfolio that are focused on making it easy to move in. And then the next one is making it hard to leave. And so, you know, those amenities like the Hello Alfred, and more, these are not just the physical amenities, but the service amenities. So things like, you know, pet care, or companies that are addressing, you know, again, you know, just my overall experience, you know, like a Ritual or something that's bringing like a virtual food court into a building, and, you know, others that just make it so much, you know, community or social, other amenities that make it such that I never want to leave. And so this is something that we're seeing, again, is a big trend, is not just the physical amenities, the gyms and so on, but actually the experience amenities to make me want to stay. All right, so the second, you know, big trend, the planet. You know, everyone started to care about the planet again, which is pretty awesome. Obviously, commercial real estate is a really big, you know, constituent contributing to a lot of energy use and global warming and things like this. And, you know, the residents and tenants of commercial real estate are very excited about how do we make an impact to contributing to reducing some of those emissions. Now, everywhere from kind of construction, again, to experience are ways that we can address this. You know, one company that we have is a company called Icon. So Icon is 3D printing homes. In 24 hours, they can 3D print an 800 square foot home for $4,000 and have almost zero waste. They print concrete, so some of this lumber and other things, and modular housing is something people have talked about, but you lose the economies of scale as soon as you put the goods on the truck. And so this is and they're using locally sourced materials for development. So this is something that's on the residential space right now. They're starting to build 2-story buildings, and they'll certainly grow from here in time to come. But one of the companies that I think can truly change the world within our portfolio and has a huge implication on sustainability and the ESG.
And Constance, can you go into that a little bit more? Because I find this this company just fascinating in what they're doing, especially in the wave of rising construction costs and affordability, quite honestly. And when you say things like they can 3D print a house in a couple of days, but what like, let's take an 800 square foot unit, right? What can they build it for, versus traditional building methods?
Yeah, so I mean, this picture on the bottom left is one of their homes, and so if I showed you the inside, like, it's beautiful, like you wouldn't mind living there. And so, but the evolution of this company. So yeah, everything from like affordable to traditional and luxury homes they're doing right now. So they built a 30-home community in Mexico City. This was a project with a government and a charity, actually, with the mission of transforming slums into communities. And so they built a 30-home community in Mexico City. They have another development in Austin. They've got a mid-tier development in Austin, which would have list price of $400,000. The homes are selling for about $80K over list. And then they just signed an LOI with a large home builder to do 100 homes, which is the intent to go to 1,000, but 100 homes that will be everything from affordable to luxury. And so why are people really excited about this in the housing market? At scale, they can save about 60% of the traditional building costs on home development. And so, when in an industry that hasn't ever been innovated on, like housing development, this is really significant. So, if I'm a Lennar or DR Horton or one of the big home builders, I can think about either either increase my margins or I significantly decrease my prices, but no matter what, I'm pumping out much larger volume because I can build it so much faster.
And is Icon doing the development, or are they just leasing and licensing the equipment?
Yeah, so they've initially done some development more as proof of concept, but their business model is truly to license and sell the printers and the concrete. It's concrete that they do the printing off of. And so, so their business model is to enable, the home builders and the like to be able to do it themselves. Their second big market is the military. They just finished printing the largest 3D printed building in the world. It's a military barracks. They're also doing a bunch of infrastructure projects for the DoD. And then the third thing that they're doing is they are building simulated habitats on the moon and Mars for NASA. So this is on-world and off-world.
Yeah,
They're really,
cool.
like I said, they're really changing the world.
SpaceX is going to take us there, and you need somebody to build us housing.
All right, so another company that we're pretty excited about, we just made an investment out of in the new fund is called Kayo. And this is one that's both kind of experience and also an ESG focus, but Kayo is providing basically a modern day marketplace, sort of for sustainable or for consigned furniture. So, Craigslist has been like kind of the only solution to this for a lot of years. And the problem that most people have is, I'm moving or I want to refresh my furniture and I don't want Craigslist crazies coming through my house and I don't want to dump it on the street. If I'm a multifamily owner and operator, I've got people who are leaving my apartments and leaving their stuff in them. And so what do you do with this? And so this is actually a multi-billion-dollar industry. And what Kayo does is they have a completely white glove service. They'll come in, they'll take the furniture, they'll bring it to their offices, they'll photograph it, they'll clean it, they'll list it, they'll give you 40% of the sales price if it sells in the first 6 months, 20% in the next 3 months, or a goodwill slip if it doesn't sell at all. But what they do is they really solve my problem of moving that furniture in the first place and doing it in a sustainable way. And so they're partnering with our multifamily providers, but also residential real estate and doing things like staging and other services. And then, of course, parking. What do we do with parking, and how do we think about, making use of parking spaces, thinking about electrical vehicles, thinking about energy and putting money back onto the grid, using EV chargers, optimizing efficiencies within our buildings, alongside of it. So these are big themes that we're thinking about, some of the big themes, as well as other energy applications and others. And I think our next trend, we've got one more. The furniture company we just talked about is Kaio, K-A-I-Y-O. That was the question.
I'm using computer power here. I do apologize, technical. I'm just going to take like 10 seconds.
Furniture company we just talked about. All right, so while Michael is jumping off and trying to solve for this, I'll continue on. The third trend, and you just won't see the slide here until Michael moves it forward, but is something that we're calling, just automation, automating operations. So, as I said kind of earlier, it's easy to do things the way that we've always done them when things are going well. Michael, if you don't mind advancing the slide when you get there.
Yeah, let me do it. I got to shut off my other one.
So okay, no worries. I can.
I apologize there. I don't know what's happening.
So anyways, it's easy to do things the way we've always done them when things are going well. When times of change or uncertainty, like, times of COVID, that's when it's time to really assess how we do things. And so the third trend that we were just going to talk about is operational digitization and automating some of those things that we've always done manually. And so, a lot of the trends we're seeing is things like leasing. So, do we need to have leasing agents everywhere? Can we repurpose leasing agents to, do other things and, automate the way leads come in and maybe automate them across a portfolio and, other things? When we think about virtual, do we need people to come? I mean, one of the big things that COVID showed is, do you need people to come in to rent an apartment? I mean, like, the technology has existed for a long time to be able to do virtual touring and virtual leasing. And so, that's one of the things we think a lot about. And then, even on the bottom left here, this is an example of a company called Tailorbird. And Tailorbird is helping on the development side, particularly for value add buildings. If I'm going to go purchase a new property, what Tailorbird can do is basically just use photo technology and visual imaging to estimate, to go out and basically create an RFP for developers and contractors to bid on, so that I can basically take about 4 months out of the process, have that feed into my underwriting process and basically be shovel ready at close. And so using, like I said, visual technology to, really create my spec on the value add project.
I'm back up and running, Constance. So we have a couple questions, and I want to back up for a second. So somebody had the question about the name of the furniture company that was just mentioned. Wasn't on the slide.
Yeah, so I quickly mentioned that, I think, when you were off, but it's Kaio, K-A-I-Y-O.
K-A-I-Y-O. And then we had also somebody just mentioned, a little skepticism about living in a concrete home itself. So
concrete box.
By the way,
my friend.
I kind of think the same thing. And I think one thing you have to, consider with everything is this is sort of 3D printing 101. And where this goes from here, these are concept homes, these are affordable, and these are all the issues, especially when we talk about affordable, that when we get into the luxury, that they will be solving. But to be able to create something in half the time at half the cost, you can layer on other things along the way. And then, and you can comment on that as well, but I look at these innovations as, just kind of the first generation of many to come. And, we go back to the cell phone and we think about the brick and where we are today, that's kind of what every industry has gone through.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm trying to see if I could quickly share some. If I can just quickly like pull up a couple of examples of this. Is if you saw the homes, you would find that it's kind of something really cool. Is that it's anything but a concrete box. These homes are. Let's see. These homes are actually. Can I share my screen a second, Michael?
Yeah, I think Hannah actually has control here. So
Okay,
Hannah,
let me see if I can. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Right, and I know that I just read something that Icon actually partnered with Lake Flotta Designers.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
So I think I have a picture. I just pulled up a random presentation, so I don't exactly. I'm just doing this on the fly here, but
Yeah.
this was the very first house they built in 2018. So you saw an example of this in that slide. This was a second one they printed in 2019, 24 hours print time, 500 square feet. And this is an example of 3 homes they printed at one time in March of 2020. 24 hours, 400 square feet per home. I've got some interior pictures. We'll call it, this is, comfortable, dignified living. These, all of these that I just showed you are affordable living homes, so built for that. But these are nice homes. Like no one feels like I'm in a concrete box being in here. This is the world's first 3D printed community in Mexico City. This is an example of what they're doing for the Marine Corps. So this was some arches that they were creating actually for vehicle shelter. This is the habitats on Mars that they're simulating. This is a rocket pad launcher that they built. So the thing about 3D printing is it's not secluded to a box. You can print it in any shape that you want. So, this is an example of this is what a 3D printer could do. This is definitely not a box. And so, this is something that, you design what you want, you put it through the printer and, hit go. And so, this is just some of the, technology. This is the one that you're talking about, Michael, for Lake Flotta. And sorry, so this is a snapshot. I don't know if I have a full picture of it. We'll see. But this is, I mentioned that there's a community. These are the houses in Austin that are going for 400,000 list. They were going for 80K over list. There's a cool CBS special that just came out. You can see it on YouTube, where they brought in a couple to, like tour the house and you can kind of see it. But this is, they built the shell in the walls, as you can see here. This is the military barracks I was talking about. And this is the Lake Flotta house. So definitely not a concrete box, a really cool luxury building that they're printing as we speak right now. I actually saw the beginning of it. And so, the thing you can do with 3D printing is architecture elements that you can't do otherwise. So, and here's another Bjork Ingels home that's being designed right now. So again, I know this wasn't meant to take up all the time for Icon, but it's really different than just a square box.
Yeah, and the other question was, how is it insulated?
Yeah, so what they do when they're printing is actually they leave the they print for the purpose of being able to funnel through the insulation as well as the electricity, piping, that kind of thing. The next generation of printer, they're actually contemplating that they will print the insulation along with the concrete at the same time.
Great. And if you can share the slides again, it'd be great.
All right, so again, like these 3 themes, we've got, I mentioned we've got over 100 companies in the portfolio, a number of them that fall into this. What we thought we would do is maybe do a couple of case studies on one from each one. I think Icon was one of them, so we've kind of done that. But if you go to the next slide here, I think one of the companies we wanted to highlight on the experience side was Moto Refi. So this is an example of one of those, what we'll call outside in companies. So, what Moto Refi does is, they have completely digitized the auto refinancing process. So like what Better did to mortgages, Hippo did to homeowners insurance, Moto Refi is doing for auto finance. And so, about 80% of people finance their cars when they purchase them, and almost 100% of them do so through the dealership. Now, dealers aren't making any of their money anymore on cars. They're making all of their money on financing and warranty. So even if you have really good credit, you're not coming out of there with a good rate. Now, bear with me. I'm going to bring this back to our industry in a minute. Credit unions have made this their bread and butter. They've been refinancing cars for many years, but of course, credit unions have no good customer acquisition channels and no digital platform to speak of. And this is where Moto Refi comes in. So Moto Refi is a platform that completely digitally underwrites for those credit unions. They've got big partnerships with firms like Credit Karma and SoFi from a customer acquisition channel. And what they'll do is they'll pay $200 of a referral fees for any customer referred into the platform. So one of the things that we find is really interesting with Moto Refi is this idea of customer experience. A lot of our partners have market affiliate programs in their buildings or in their franchises or their greater groups. And so, if you brought this into your co-working spaces, your office buildings, your multifamily units, and offer your residents this opportunity to basically save $100 a month by refinancing, not only will that provide ancillary income to the tune of $200 per loan referred, but Moto Refi on average is saving consumers about $1,200 a month, which is on their auto loans, and that's generally the largest expense next to rent for consumers. So by having your residents actually take part in this, you're actually also providing an additional $1,200 of disposable income for that resident, which makes them a higher quality resident. So win-win in a lot of places.
So this is something that you're packaging up with the housing experience just to make everything more affordable, like providing the gym, providing better financing fees, providing more disposable income so they can pay more on rent or at least have more discretionary income.
That's right.
That service.
And providing ancillary income, to boot.
Yeah.
Icon, I think we've beat this one. We already kind of shared this so we can move on to the next. This is an example of the automating, operationalizing, kind of our way we do things. So Peak is helping with virtual leasing, but sort of unlike some of the other platforms out there, what we liked about Peak, and this is kind of to your question a long time, towards the beginning, there's a million of these virtual leasing ones. What did we see in Peak? Well, Peak is kind of the only one that number one is automatic. So most of these you have to take pictures, you send it in somewhere in India, they're stitching them together, or offshore, they're stitching them together and then providing a video for you. Peak is actually automatic. So, you upload the pictures and you automatically have a virtual tour. They will also stage that virtually for you. So you don't have to put the furniture in, you can put the furniture in digitally. And then, and then finally, they're also providing a bunch of analytics and integration to the marketing tools, which are helping our property managers convert leads much more faster. And so this is a, really good example of just a company that's doing some unique things that set it apart from the crowd of others, and is gaining a lot of good traction with a lot of great partners out there.
Good example. Okay. Thank you, Constance. Let's jump to so this is actually our slide, and I'm going to just talk briefly about how Origin used property technology in our day-to-day operations. And Constance went over a lot about the resident experience. And when we think about technology, we think about problems and solutions. And you either build it or you rent it. And we certainly have a history of innovation and building our own technology and adopting technology at origin. And I think this goes back at least, 6, 7, 8 years when we first built our investor portal. And at that time, the challenge was that there was really no system out there that could handle the reporting, the ability to log in, the ability to communicate, to have a conversation with investors, to do it in a way that they wanted to do it. And so we built it, and we built one of the first portals out there, and then came along all these other companies that sort of got into that space. So we decided to get out of that business and actually rent one. And so, what we're doing now, especially on the machine learning side, is one of the biggest problems that we've had over the last, I can say this is since we started, is just forecasting growth in markets. And there's plenty of companies out there who claim that they do accurate forecasting. There's always problems. They go by zip codes, and anybody who lives in a city knows that within a zip code, things can vary quite greatly. And so we always had these issues, looking at the accuracy. And a lot of these companies, they don't even, back test their own stuff. They don't give you the data. So we actually decided to build it. And I give a lot of credit to our acquisitions investment management team, because they took this upon themselves, hired 2 data scientists. And now what our system does today is it analyzes more than 10 million pieces of data from every imaginable source out there. We're looking at moving trucks, we're looking at affordability, we're looking at social media. And this database of information is really the way that you can analyze 50, 60, 100 markets out there and rank them and look at where the population growth is happening, coupled with the affordability, right? Because affordability without population growth means nothing. And so what this has done is it's allowed us to sort of look at our markets again. And we've added most recently Salt Lake City, we added Las Vegas to our target markets. We've also added Jacksonville, and we've put Houston and Chicago on hold, because when we do our own back testing, it's about 98.5% accurate on a macro level. The micro levels, we still have work to do, because there are nuances about looking at the individual properties within that market and how they pick them up. But again, this is sort of the first version, and we know it's very accurate at the macro level. And it's extremely important to get this part right, because when you look at a market, the difference between a 2% growth rate and a 3% growth rate over a period of 10 years can mean millions of dollars in property value. And this is one of those areas that we have to get right, and knowing the right markets that we're going to be in, knowing what the relative value is within those markets, the affordability ratio, and where the prospects are. So it's an iterative process, but again, this comes back to, we had a problem. There isn't a great solution in the market to solve this problem. So we have actually been forced to build it. And this is something that's core to origin innovation. And we believe that it gives us a distinct advantage over our competitors in this environment as well. And it's a value add to investing with us as well. So next slide, please. Let me see, I've got a few questions, and I do want to answer these in real time. Can't read this. You implied the data you used is more granular than zip codes, right? So how granular are you going for both macro markets and sub-markets? So again, there's 86 variables within, more than that, within the data that we're analyzing. But when we go down to the sub-market, the challenge with the services that we were using was they were only on a zip code basis. And what our system allows us to do is actually triangulate an area that we believe represents the sub-market. So it picks up the, only the properties within that sub-market that we want to include, because there's a lot of noise when you can't pick and choose your actual area of comparable properties. So this gives us a lot more flexibility. It's a work in progress, even at the sub-market level. When we're looking at that for growth rates, we still have to go down into that and analyze the data to make sure that what we're getting is accurate. And we always compare that against the products that we also rent. So we're not completely giving up the products we rent, but we're comparing these together. We're back testing, we're looking at these forward as well. But I will tell you on a macro level, ours is far more accurate. And this is something I wish we had 10 years ago, because going forward, it's going to help with decision making at the firm quite a bit, new markets, and then dropping old markets as well. So let's talk about the next slide is tech in the resident life cycle. And Constance already went over this about tech, but we think about the resident life cycle starting with the website contact, right? When renters come in, they look at a website and they want to preview the property, and they want to do virtual tours of the property as well. Because most renters today, if you think about it, they're renting from out of town, and 70% or more of renters never visit the property at all. So it's very important to give them the experience as if they're there, and giving them the information so that they can make the actual decision itself. And then once they do that, then it goes on to the application and screening, right? Is it easy to apply? And I've gone through this, even with my son, when he was applying for rental, because I had to be the co-signer on this, and it was a long and arduous process. And you can actually drop out at that period during the resident experience. So the application screening, making sure it's simple and easy to get them through the process, is all about technology and customer experience and user experience. Then once you get them in there, it's the move-in experience as well. And so for first-time renters, and I'll go back to my son, it's confusing. And you don't know that you need to turn on the electric and the water and everything else. And so what we do at Origin is these are part of that journey, and just sending an email and saying, hey, you're 2 weeks out and you need to contact ComEd, and you need to schedule the elevator, and you need to contact your other utility companies to get these things set up. Because the last thing you want somebody to do is get into their apartment and they don't have utilities. That's an incredibly bad experience, and we know this, so we help them along the way to make this entire journey pleasant as well. The next thing really is about living there, right? How do you make it easy for a resident to pay rent? Constance talked about LifeLock. So we're using applications like this that make it easy to guarantee rental payments, to guarantee co-signers, things of that nature. It goes beyond that though. Then it's keyless access as well. Making sure that your residents can access the gym and the building and their apartments via the app. If they have a problem in the unit, can they submit work orders easy? Can they submit a request to pick up their trash on certain days at a certain time? And this is attracting and retaining tenants is the single most important thing at Origin that we can work on, because all we do here is multifamily now. Going forward, we do have some legacy office properties in our portfolio, but when we think about that resident experience, it's attracting them, it's making sure that they have a great experience, and if they do, then it's retaining them. And this is mission critical to our operations, which is why we spend so much time and money here. And intuitively, it makes sense, because happy tenants, they both refer, they stay longer, they're willing to pay more rent, because you have to differentiate between value that they're getting and price. And in a lot of communities, let's face it, that space is a commodity. So if you can give them an incredible experience, they're more likely than not to stay there, refer their friends, and a resident who you're able to retain, you actually, it's so much more profitable for managing a rental community than trying to attract a new tenant, which is quite expensive. So it's the KPI that I would say that we focus on the most here. So let me, that's just kind of a preview of what we're doing on the resident life cycle. So I gave you a sneak preview on how we're using technology at the multifamily side. And then we also have other examples, like we're, switching to eFront right now, which is a BlackRock system, because BlackRock spends $30 million a year in R&D on their system. So we just can't compete with companies like that. And if we can rent it, we will. But if we can't, then we build it on our own. So thank you. And let's move on to some of these questions that we're getting. And if you have any questions about prop tech and its role in managing, let me see here. I've got the chat box up here. So let me ask some of these questions. Constance, anything you want to add there?
I think you did a really good job of kind of going through that resident life cycle. And I just think it's important, people are starting to expect their experience to be easy, to be green, to be flexible, to be cheap, to be better. And it's taken a long time for real estate to catch up to that. And I think that this is the important part of it. And everything that you said, Michael, is right on in terms of our focus and what we're looking at, data companies to help you make those, better than zip code decisions, and mobility companies and experience, and kind of all across those challenges that you're talking about are companies we're spending a lot of time focusing on.
So we have a question from Bart. And Bart, I'm not quite sure, but Constance, maybe you understand this, but he said, what would NOI increase of 30 to 300% do for investors combined with tax equity? Do you know what that means? And Bart, maybe you want to send in that question and just.
I don't know, if your tax rates go up and diminish your ROI, I can't help that.
Yeah, 30 to 300%.
I think you still want profit.
Okay. So we have a question from Faraz. Are any of Constance's funds open for investment at this time to accredited and qualified investors? So Constance, I know you wanted to talk about your Fund 3 closing, and this webinar was actually moved up because Constance does have a closing near the end of this month. So Constance, you can take that.
Yeah, and maybe, Michael, if you don't mind, the last slide I think has my contact information. So we are closing our third fund right now. We're at the tail end. We're doing our final close June 30th. So if you are interested, here's my contact information here. Please reach out. I'd be happy to share more fund details. If you're accredited, and if you're accredited, you don't need to be qualified, but you need to be accredited. And we're raising, our fund is a 125 target, our 150 cap. We'll hit our target. So right now we're looking at, do we exceed our cap? So certainly if you're interested, please get in touch with me. But one thing we do try to do with all of our deals is get co-invest opportunities in our direct investments as well. So if people are interested in that, that's a perk of being part of the fund as well. I should also say, go ahead.
No, I just want to be clear that Origin in no way benefits from this. So we're having Constance on the webinar today because she's an expert in this area. Prop tech is just an interesting space that we wanted you to know about. And certainly there's an ancillary benefit because there is an investment opportunity here with Constance as well. And if anybody wants to talk to me about it, feel free to email me as well. And I can fill you in because I've been an investor in Fund 2 and I'm now an investor in Fund 3 as well.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Michael. And I'm excited about the opportunity. I think this is, we've been, like I said, doing this for 13 years now. And this is a time where I used to have to explain what prop tech was. I don't have to do that anymore. People get it. They're leaning in now. It's, we've had a tremendous year in terms of our portfolio success. And, again, happy to share that with others as they are interested in looking at our returns and opportunities.
Yeah, and you actually have another question here about returns. So you have some interested investors here in the fund. So maybe you can just go over the past returns of Fund 1 and Fund 2.
Okay, one of my favorite questions, actually. So we're actually, again, full disclosure, future performance, not indicative of the past necessarily. That's the SEC, I have to say that. But we are tracking in the top decile of all venture capital, North America and globally, for our first two funds. We had an 18x return, a 49% IRR on our 2008 vintage. Our 2015 vintage right now is tracking at 3x, and we're actually expecting that to be significantly higher, but based on actual financing events to date. We've had 4 big exits. We've already returned 40% of invested capital to investors. And I've had 3 IPOs, 2 that have been announced, 1 that closed last year, 4 unicorns in the fund, and a bunch of other big accretive financing events even in this past year. So that's tracking really well. And then the new fund, which we are, like I said, closing in on now, we've made 6 investments so far, about 13 million in the ground, and we're actually we're tracking at about 2x invested capital. So, one thing that new investors get coming into this fund is actually a little bit of accretive value off the bat.
And Constance, are those net returns?
I just quoted gross returns.
Gross returns. And how does that translate into net returns?
So net returns about 12x on the first fund. We're about 2x right now tracking on the 2015 fund, but expecting that to go up significantly as the rest of the fund is realized. And then the third fund is still really early.
Yeah. Okay. Great question. That's Faraz asked that again. And then, another question that came in was really about how do you see things changing in property technology from COVID? Like, what new innovations are out there? What are people thinking? And how did this accelerate or maybe decelerate certain areas of the of property technology?
So as I said, what I've seen is that people have really leaned in. Again, it's easy to do things the way we've always done it when things are going up, but this is a time of pause, and I think that traditionally people were like, okay, it's 4 walls in a box, and that's all I really need to think about here. But over the last several years, disruptive models like WeWork and Compass and Open Door and Airbnb have come in, and while you can talk a lot about different business models, and we never got behind any of those for those reasons, but the fact of the matter is that they were providing things that traditional owners and operators weren't. They were providing flexibility. They were making it easy. They were making it, green and cheaper. And I think that along with the COVID tailwinds has really made people say, what? Let's think about what we really offer. Maybe we should think about the consumer here. Maybe there are other ways to make money besides rent revenue or leasing revenue. And maybe we should think about other things besides cap rates and commissions. And how do we make real estate something bigger than just 4 walls? And I think that's what's happening today.
Great. Well, thank you. The last question is for me. Are Origins funds only opportunity zone funds? The answer to that is no. We actually run something called the Origin Income Plus Fund, which is a fund that is mainly income oriented, but there's also an appreciation component to it as well. So you can contact us to get more information about that fund at investor relations at origininvestments.com, or you can just go to the website, and all of our material is downloadable from there. And I'll give you a little sneak preview, but at the end of this year, probably around September, October, we're going to be announcing another fund, which is a growth fund primarily around ground up development. So that's an exciting new things and happening at Origin. So we will really run the gamut from everything from low risk to high risk, from income all the way to growth. So we're going to be announcing that come September. Thank you for your question. Thank you so much for being on today. Anything you want to say in closing before we wrap this up, because we're now a little bit over an hour?
No, I just thanks for having me, and to the audience, feel free to reach out with any questions, comments. We love to hear from you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for attending, everybody. Have a good day.